What steps has the Albanese Labor government taken to get wages moving after a decade of wage stagnation?
Good call to the Minister for Employment, Industrial Relations and the Minister for the Arts.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. And I want to thank the member for Boothby for the question, someone with a real commitment to getting wages moving in this country. Because for 10 years, low wages were a deliberate design feature of the previous government and their management of the economy. And it was one of the few commitments they managed to deliver on. The pace of wage growth under the previous government at 2.1% wasn't just slower than the decade before or slower than the decade before that. It was the slowest pace of wage growth since the Second World War, and it was delivered quite deliberately by those opposite. What do we have now? We now, instead of the 2.1% that averaged over their decade, wages are now at 3.7%. But if you're on an award, the latest increase, 5.75%. But if you're on the minimum wage, the latest increase, 8.6%. And if you work in the aged care sector, on top of those increases, a further 15% improvement in your wages. The party of robo-debt didn't just go after people on welfare. They went after people on wages as well. And they succeeded. And they succeeded. All these workers that I described are now getting more in their bank accounts for one simple reason, and that is because the government has changed. They refused, those opposite refused to turn up at the Fair Work Commission and argue for an improvement at the minimum wage. They refused to turn up at the Fair Work Commission and argue for an improvement in award wages. They refused to turn up at the Fair Work Commission and argue for an improvement in the wages of aged care workers. All of this was part of the wage stagnation story of that decade. But then in opposition, they've continued, because part of getting wages moving is to close the gender pay gap. And yet, when we introduced stronger gender equity laws, they opposed them. When we introduced access to flexible work, they opposed it. When we had legislation to ban pay secrecy clauses, they opposed it. When we had a law put to the parliament to ban job ads from being below the legal minimum. Now think about that. That one might have been not so controversial. A job ad should be banned if it's advertising a wage rate that is illegal, but even that was too far a step for them. Even that was too much, and they had to oppose that as well. Sunsetting zombie agreements where people are on pay and conditions from the Howard work choices era. They had to oppose that as well. And having workable bargaining rules. Well, there's more tests to come in your commitment as to whether you care about people getting more pay when we look later this year at closing the loopholes that undercut wages.